Animal Well is, in my opinion, a masterfully crafted game and is the newest entry to my favorite genre of video games that I like to call Eureka Games. I've also heard these games referred to as knowledge-based games, which I think is an equally appropriate and more SEO-friendly term, so we'll use both of those interchangeably throughout this video. Other games in the genre are things like Tunic, Return of the Obra Dinn, Tears of the Kingdom, and of course, the GOAT of Eureka Games, Outer Wilds. All of these games are easily in my top 30 of all time because these are games that, by design, withhold information and knowledge from the player and instead trust you to figure things out for yourself and have those little victories as the gears in your head finally click into place. While a lot of games today use bright yellow paint to show you where you can and can't go, or are filled with enough tutorial text to earn the game a spot in the Dewey Decimal System, knowledge-based games will instead use environmental context clues and gentle nudges in their map design to bring you to the precipice of a great discovery, and then they'll back off and allow you to have your Eureka moment using that big, beautiful brain of yours. It's like intellectual edging. Because of that, a lot of these games are best gone into with as little spoilers as possible, so I'm going to try to show off things that are only revealed in the first 30 to 60 minutes of each game, and hopefully this will convince you to look into some of these games. Also, feel free to let me know of other Eureka or knowledge-based games, because I am always hungry for more of these. First, let's talk about the game that inspired this video, Animal Well. Just like Tame Impala, this game's development team is just one guy, Billy Basso. And while most Metroidvania games will drop you in the middle of a vast world with little to no context and say, good luck, have fun, Animal Well takes us a step further than most other games in its genre. There is very little text, there are no NPCs that point you anywhere, it's just game design that nudges you towards the objectives, but allows you to make the discoveries for yourself. There are so many good examples of Eureka moments in this game that are a lot better than the ones that I'm going to share with you, but I want people to find them out for themselves, so I'm only going to share super early game footage. There's a part where, after doing a few puzzles, you find yourself at the bottom of a waterfall that you just jump down. After exploring for a bit, you find a door that is locked by 3 switches, but all the switches are out of reach for our little blob friend. So with no other option, you press forward. And the next room is a treasure chest, and the great hidden treasure is a yo-yo, presented without context and without much fanfare. If you go back to the previous room with all the inaccessible switches and play around with the yo-yo at just the right angles, you find out that the spin on the yo-yo lets you roll it across surfaces and hit the buttons that are out of reach. A couple of rooms later, you find some shielded enemies that always turn to face you, and their shields just happen to block the yo-yo. However, the yo-yo can pass through surfaces that you can't, so you're able to stand in front of the enemies while using the yo-yo to hit them from behind, which stuns them temporarily and allows you to pass. A few more rooms later, you're met with a door that is locked by 2 buttons that both need to be pressed simultaneously, and the way that you do this is you do a little walk the dog maneuver with your yo-yo, and you get it to pass through a small tunnel and hit the other button. All of these are discoveries that you have to make on your own. And like I said, this is the lamest example in the game. Every item in Animal Well has one feature that is very obvious, but either by experimentation or just through sheer accident, you can discover the secret potential of these items that completely cracks the game open and allows you to find more and more of the Well's hidden secrets. I'm probably about halfway through the game, and I am constantly finding myself in awe of not only the random stuff that Billy Basso programmed into his game, but the amount of confidence that he has in his game design to know that he can give the player just enough to figure things out for themselves. The next knowledge-based game that I want to talk about is Tunic, made by Isometricorp Games. This game asks the question, what if you took The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, but added more puzzles to it, injected it with some Souls-like DNA, and just invented an entire frickin' language that could optionally be deciphered by the player if they had several hours and a notepad. And as one of the people who had several hours and a notepad to figure out Tunic's language early on in the game, this spoke to me. I thoroughly enjoyed Tunic. While the combat maybe felt a bit lacking in places, the main draw of this game is the fact that it comes with its own virtual manual harkening back to the good old days in the 90s, when video games were simpler and we didn't know what microplastics were yet. You discover different pages of the game manual as you go along, and they end up telling you about different mechanics and interactions between items that you could have been using all along, but you may not have known even existed. And as you learn the game's style and the language it speaks, you start recognizing patterns in the environment that indicate secrets and puzzles that you can solve. And the game's final puzzle is this massive Easter egg hunt that is the culmination of everything that you've learned throughout the entire game. As you go around figuring things out, having your Eureka moments, and being intellectually edged by this game, you can almost feel your self-perception of your own IQ rising as you become a more and more pretentious gamer. Hell, even the music of this game has coded messages in it that you have to figure out. And there's a track that has a coded message that leads you to a website with an entire ARG built into it. I never went into that part because I'm not a big ARG guy, but that's just crazy to me. From a surface level perspective, you can absolutely enjoy this game as a love letter to top-down Zelda games, and you can appreciate it from that angle, but it is so much more than that. And it's really when you get into the weeds of it and look at all of the game's puzzles, secrets, and go the completionist route is when you get the most out of Tunic. The third game I wanted to talk about today is called Return of the Obra Dinn. Just like the last two games on this list, the programming, game design, and puzzles were all made by one guy, Lucas Pope. He's also the guy who made Papers, Please. In Return of the Obra Dinn, the year is 1803 and a ship called the Obra Dinn that had gone missing returns, as the game's name would imply. The catch is not a single soul aboard the ship is alive. You were hired by the East India Company, an insurance provider, and your goal is to figure out what happened to the crew aboard the Obra Dinn on their ill-fated voyage. You have a ledger of everyone who is supposed to be on board, you have a drawing of the entire crew, you have a pocket watch, and you have your 2 brain cells that you can rub together. The way that you figure things out is you approach a corpse and activate your magic pocket watch, which will take you back in time to the moment of that person's death. Based on what you see, what you hear, and even based on the languages and accents and dialects of those involved in the snapshots of the death, you use whatever information you can gather to figure out who the person was, how they died, and by whose hand if that's applicable. And then, if that wasn't enough to make your brain horny, the story's not even delivered in linear fashion, meaning that once you figure all this stuff out, you still have to mentally stitch together the sequence of events to determine what caused the demise of the Obra Dinn. There is very little hand-holding, and you're only told if you were right or wrong after you successfully figure out the fates of 5 passengers, meaning you can't just spam guesses to see if you were right. Also, the music for this game is just an absolute bop. Take a listen. Return of the Obra Dinn is a game that tickles my brain in all the right ways, especially if you go into it mostly blind. Before I talk about the final game, let's bring up some honorable mentions for other Eureka games that could have easily found a spot in this video. We have The Witness, which is an open world puzzle game that often presents its puzzles to you with little to no context. Chants of Sonar is basically the Dark Souls of Duolingo, where you have 5 separate languages to figure out while trying to navigate a city that is often hostile towards you. And finally, there's also the last 2 mainline Legend of Zelda games that basically plop you into an open world and make you figure out how to save the princess and defeat Ganon at your own pace, with an absolutely insane physics engine to boot. Other games that I've heard are similar that tickle your brain in that way, but I haven't tried out for myself, are The Curse of the Golden Idol, Taiji, The Talos Principle, and Subnautica. But the game that I want to talk about the most, that is not only my favorite knowledge-based game, but is also my favorite game of all time, is Outer Wilds. This is a game in which when you finish the game, there is not a single item, ability, or MacGuffin in your inventory that is any different from what you had the moment you started. The only thing that has changed is your knowledge about the game's world, lore, and mechanics. You're basically a part of an interplanetary Boy Scouts troop, and you have a one-man spaceship that you can use to explore your own tiny solar system at whatever pace you'd like. The only issue is that for some reason, every 22 minutes, everything resets back to the way that it was at the start of the game. The only thing you keep is whatever you learned during that time. So the whole gameplay loop of Outer Wilds is you have 22 minutes to hop in your spaceship, explore the solar system, find out why you're stuck in a time loop, and how to break the cycle if that's even possible. Some of your loops will be spent mostly reading text to see what an older race of aliens experienced and see how that can help you. Some of your other loops may be spent learning about different game mechanics and how to use them in your quest, but most of your loops will be spent accidentally getting sucked in by the sun's gravity and dying a horrible death. I'm not going to elaborate much more on how Outer Wilds plays out, because like all the other games that I've mentioned, you can only play this game for the first time once. and it's better that you go into it as unspoiled as you possibly can. This game is a near perfect game about discovery, exploration, the search for knowledge, and finding one's own sense of self in a large and generally uncaring universe. As a husband and father, I hope I never ever get blunt force trauma to the head and forget key parts of my life, but if I did, the silver lining would be that I get to experience Outer Wilds again, you know? Like I said at the beginning of this video, knowledge-based games or Eureka games are one of my favorite types of games because they just tickle my brain in all the right ways. And the thing about this type of game is no matter what kind of person you are or what kind of games you like, there's always going to be one knowledge-based game that's right up your alley. In this video, we've talked about a Metroidvania, a combat-heavy Zelda clone, a weird trippy detective game, and a space exploration game. There's no specific genre that lays claim to knowledge-based games. However, the common denominator of all of these is that they're made by independent developers because indie devs, unlike our corporate overlords, know that you're not stupid, and they know that it's okay to struggle and figure things out for yourself. With the absolute dumpster fire that the gaming industry is in right now, thanks to big publishers, looking right at you, Phil Spencer, you should do yourself a favor and check out some of these games and support the people who are carrying and will continue to carry the medium on their backs. But anyway, I do very much appreciate the fact that you've graced me with the gift of your time. I hope you have a wonderful day, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next one. Take care now.